What do you do when the outlook is cloudy? Some people love a thunderstorm, and others panic when the clouds roll in. This is just as true of financial markets, which are very stormy right now. So today, we're going to talk about risk tolerance through the lens of weather and share some tips for protecting your portfolio and your financial plan when life gets stormy.
It's easy to get lost on the way to retirement. Things like taxes, improper planning, and excessive market risk can all lead you astray from your goal of a successful and happy retirement. That's where Liz Whittaberry comes in. She's a holistic financial advisor and the founder of Best Path Advisors, and she can help guide you to a better financial path. This is Retire on Your Best Path with Liz Whittaberry.
Hey, and welcome to another episode of Retire on Your Best Path. I'm Walter Storholt, filling in for Mark Killian on today's episode. Mark will be back again before too long, but happy to fill in for him. And as always, joined by the founder of Best Path Advisors, financial advisor Liz Whittaberry, serving you throughout the Dallas and Fort Worth areas and from wherever you are. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us this week on today's episode. We're talking weather, Liz, which is one of my favorite things, and of course, financial markets and turbulence and risk tolerance and all these kinds of things. So I'm excited to see how this all blends together on today's episode with you.
Me too. And it's funny, here in Texas, we just say, if you don't like the weather, just wait a few minutes.
Right. And it'll change. And you may still not like it after it changes, but it'll at least have changed, right?
Yeah, it changes very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm a big weather nerd, so much so that I'm on weather message boards, Liz, right?
Oh, wow.
Like that's a thing, apparently. That's probably the nerdiest thing I do, but I've just always been fascinated with weather since I was a kid. I used to be scared of thunderstorms, and I learned how to kind of control that fear with knowledge, and then became a big nerd and big fan of weather. Now I love storms and of all kinds, and so it's kind of fun to learn about them and understand them. And so I'm excited for today's episode, mostly just because of that passion. But we've got a few lessons that we can learn from the world of weather and apply them to the financial world pretty easily here. And I think a great place to start, Liz, is probably with the fact that, when you see the forecast, that doesn't equal what the weather is, right? These are two different things that we've got to separate out.
It is. And I don't spend a lot of time actually looking at what the forecast is because it does change so quickly here in Texas. But I do have the weather app on my phone, I do glance at it, and just looking at it and seeing what's coming up ahead, it's just telling me things that I could be prepared for. It's not actually causing anything to happen. It's just letting me know ahead of time, here's some things. Now that's, interesting. Do you use a weather app or do you actually look at something different?
Yeah, definitely the weather apps. In my local area, there's a guy that kind of does a daily report specifically for our little microclimate. So I read that each day, and then I may or may not have an upgraded, paid for higher end radar app too, just to follow the storms real closely when they're firing off.
My husband likes to follow the radar when the storms are coming in, just out of curiosity. Neither he or I are scared of storms. We grew up in Oklahoma. There were a ton of storms. They hit the news, but because they do hit Oklahoma pretty heavily for whatever reason. And I'm sure you would probably know a lot more than me because you've done all of this.
If we're looking at tornadoes, I'm paying a lot more close attention to the radar, right? We're much more into it.
Yeah. But what we're talking about right now, having a risk tolerance doesn't change what the market is doing. And that's what we want to talk about. It just helps you be prepared in the same way that we're prepared for weather.
Makes a lot of sense. So the risk tolerance that we have doesn't have any impact on the markets, just like the weather app doesn't cause the storms, but just like looking at the forecast helps us kind of prepare maybe our plans for the day, or even just emotionally knowing what to expect. Our risk tolerance should kind of play a similar role in our financial lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Knowing how you feel about it, over the years, I've been a runner, and when there would be rainstorms in the forecast, it's interesting to watch how all the different runners react to that. Some people are not going to go out and run in the rain, just not going to do it. Others are going to run but maybe shorten the distance, stay close to home. Others are just going to go out and run their normal distance unless there's actually thunder and the possibility of lightning. And so there can be a lot of different ways that people react to weather. And the same is true with our risk tolerance. There's a lot of different ways that we react to the markets. And you really do need to understand how you react when things get stormy so that you can be prepared ahead of time, because that can sneak up on you. Just like with here in Texas, it can one day be totally normal and the next day it's raining cats and dogs, or even later that day and you didn't expect it. The same is true in the markets. Things can move pretty quickly and a headline can throw the market off. And then if you don't know how you are going to react, you may not be quite prepared for it.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I really like the fact that you pointed out that the same market or the same storm can affect people very differently. Some runners love going out in that storm and running in the rain. Others change their plans dramatically. Emotionally, people can be affected differently. How they react can be affected differently. So that's really good to keep in mind whenever we're dealing with maybe a volatile market, is that how I perceive it and want to react to it's very different maybe from the person next to me. And there's a lot of lessons to be learned there that I'm sure will pop up throughout the rest of our show today. Something else that jumps out to me when we're thinking about weather, and I bet there's a good financial comparison here, is that calm skies can be misleading. It's easy to feel confident when it's 75 and sunny outside, but it doesn't mean that that's going to be how it is at the end of the day. It's not necessarily going to stay like that. I remember when I was younger and helping my grandparents pack their moving truck from New Jersey, and they were moving to Maine. And it was a beautiful day out, and there was nothing in the forecast about storms. And that night we were under a tornado warning and lost power and had one of the craziest storms I've ever been in. So those calm skies were misleading that day, and they often are.
Yeah. It is amazing how fast it can change. And to your point, when we're thinking about the markets or we're thinking about our financial plan or our portfolio, we can feel very confident of all the investments that we've made when things are calm, when volatility is low, when, all of the headlines look good, everything is on the up and up, and that gives us a sense of confidence. And we just don't think about, what if, but then when things shift, for some people that can create a feeling of panic or some fear, or constantly just looking at their portfolio, checking their balance every little bit, maybe even selling at a low when they shouldn't sell at a low, because that can throw off the long-term plan. And we've got to be aware of this tendency when it is calm to think through again what we're going to do when we're faced with volatile times, so that we know exactly how we're going to handle it and we're going to be fine. It's not going to ruin our plan for the long term.
It's a great point, because I really like that perspective, because, you might kind of be thinking, man, my plan is great. And then the next day there's some sort of downturn and issue. And that same plan that you thought was great, all of a sudden your emotions are telling you, oh, no, I've got the wrong plan in place. But how can it be the great plan one day and a bad plan the next day? We've got to maybe give things a little bit bigger timeline and that sort of thing. I would imagine you sometimes see a mismatch, Liz, when somebody comes into the office to meet with you, where their risk tolerance may not match their real world situation or maybe even their behavior. Are there certain signs you look for that's telling you that that's the case? And what do you do in a situation like that?
I think it can be very telling when I see how people react when the markets go from that calm to volatile, and that is what is happening right now. We've had last year, the market was up. If we measure it by the S&P 500, it was up almost 18%. We had a very solid January with a return of 1.4%. And then we had the war start at the end of February. And so at the end of March, we were down 7.3% for the year already. Now we've had the ceasefire, we're back up. We're recording this on a Monday morning, and there's just been some new news, so we could have a lot of volatility ahead of us. But this war in Iran, the Strait of Hormuz being blocked, that impacting 20% of our global oil supply, and how that's going to flow through to the cost of gas and inflation and interest and all of these things that impact the economy. There's, some question about how long that lasts. Well, people that haven't been really thinking about any of the issues and they're invested in, a more aggressive portfolio than what they are comfortable with are feeling a lot of stress at the moment. And I have some people that have come in recently, new clients, and we're looking at their portfolios and making those adjustments. People that have just retired and they've had a pretty aggressive 401k portfolio because they didn't think about it. But now that they're retired, it's become a focus. And so that mismatch between how I'm invested when, I'm not really thinking about it versus how I want to be invested when I see all this stuff that's going on, that's where I see people get into problems because they're reacting. They're not being proactive and planning and putting together ahead of time how their plan's going to carry them through all of these kind of things, which happen. This is not unusual. We do have all of these events that happen from time to time. If you look back over history, there's always something happening here and there. So you asked, what do I do? Well, I work through how do we look at your plan, where are we off, or where are we aligned? If we're aligned, then how do we keep you on track to stay with the plan? But if you're not aligned, then how do we make some shifts and adjustments that are very, smart to make in the moment without, throwing your whole plan off? I don't want to be selling at a low, but I also want to make sure that we're looking strategically at how to make those shifts that could bring somebody in line with their actual long-term plan. Does that make sense?
It does, 100%, because I think you're hitting on another really important piece of this equation is that if something's out of alignment, then what fixes it can look different from person to person. We may not need to make dramatic changes for one person where another may need to make a lot of different changes because of how out of whack they might be, or just because, again, back to that, how they react in those various markets kind of makes me think of how not everybody needs the same gear for the weather that they're facing in two different ways. One, if we're facing a drizzle versus a blizzard, very different preparation and reaction to those two things. Or let's just say it's a cold day outside. Well, I'm going to probably still be in shorts and a t-shirt, Liz, because that's how I'm wired. And my wife might be in a full parka with snow boots and needs 3 or 4 layers. We've got a lot of pictures of the two of us standing side by side wearing completely different types of clothing. But risk tolerance is a lot like that, right? Like we're very differently affected and our reactions can be very different.
Yes. And the interesting thing about risk tolerance to me is that there's layers to it. We have our preference, which is a lot of times what we're talking about. What do you want? How much risk do you want to take? How aggressive do you want to be? How conservative do you want to be? But then we have how much risk can you take? What's your risk capacity? How much risk should you take? What is that risk budget that's going to keep you on track for your long-term plan? So it's not just what do you prefer or how much can you tolerate before you would panic, but also how much can you afford to take within the plan and how much should you take in order to make sure that you actually reach your long-term goals. All of those things need to be considered and brought into the plan to make sure that you actually are able to have a very solid and strong retirement and be on your best path all the way through to the end and not be just reacting or making decisions based on what's going on right now. The headlines can be scary right now as they are with everything going on in this war. What's going to happen and how long is this going to take? But it does blow away. We get past it and we want to still be in a good place to carry us all the way through retirement.
That's a great point, because in the end, just like with weather, the goal isn't to avoid weather. We can't really do that, right? We would just stay inside all the time. So we just need to know we can handle it, prepare for it. Sure, if I'm going out on the boat for the day and it's 90% chance of severe thunderstorms, maybe it's a good day to stay inside. But, if I'm having an outdoor picnic and it's a 30% chance of rain and maybe a storm, well, we're going to go do it, and then we'll be knowing to keep an eye to the sky, and we'll react, and we'll go back to our cars if we need to, if it starts to rain. Like we're going to figure out ways to manage the weather that gets thrown at us. And I feel like it's very similar in our financial lives. If our plan is long term, then we just need to stay the course in a lot of the situations. If our plan was only designed to be a month or two, well, then we'd be in some trouble, Liz. We'd have to make some changes maybe if that was the case. But that's not what you're usually doing with clients, right?
No, absolutely looking at the long term, and I want people to get to the end of life and look back and be very happy, not only with how their portfolio has been invested, but how they've used it in the retirement life that they've lived. And so when I'm putting the portfolio together, I'm doing that based on bucket planning. And that means I'm looking at what are your short-term cash needs, what are your mid-term cash needs, what are your long-term cash needs, your legacy goals, all of the different things that go into it, and making sure that we're aligning each part of that portfolio to support that particular role. So the short-term money is money that's going to be very conservative. It's not being impacted by what's going on right now. And it is there to cover the next 5 years of cash flow. And then the midterm money is going to be a little less conservative because we do want a little more growth in that. We want that to be there to replace this short-term bucket in the future. And then that long-term money, 10 plus years out, that money is for our legacy goals, for our longer-term retirement needs, all of the things way ahead of us. And we want to make sure that that keeps up with inflation. And so when we put the portfolio together like that, and people can see, okay, I have the capacity to weather whatever is going on, and my plan is going to do all of the things that it needs to do over these different time periods, then they feel a lot more confident. I've had a couple of clients that retired recently, and I had a call not too long ago, within the last couple of weeks, a lot of stuff going on with taxes right now. So it was mainly a call about taxes. But during that call, this gentleman said, there would have been times in the past that I would have wanted to get completely out of the market. But then when I've done that, I haven't known when to get back in, and I've lost out on a lot of growth. He said, I know that you're watching my portfolio. I know that it's set up in this way with the bucket plans. I know that you're making changes at predetermined levels to match my risk tolerance. I'm not worried about it. What a huge benefit to him to have just retired and be able to feel that way.
Yeah, what a change in mentality from before, right? The before and after picture, very different.
Yeah, and to know that he can go about going out to, going to golfing, going on some trips that they plan, doing all of these things, and he's not stressing and watching the market and watching what's going on, around the globe. He's enjoying retirement, which is what he worked very hard to get to this point to do.
Focusing on the things that matter, and that's what planning is all about. Helps you clarify that, and instead of spending all your time watching, the stock markets go up and down, you're spending your time doing the things you want, and you know that the plan is working for you. That's what it takes. But Liz kind of put a bow on this today. Unfortunately, not everybody plans that way for retirement, so that's not the typical story. A lot of people who don't work with an advisor end up kind of watching those markets all the time, and it's up, maybe let's take some money out this week. It's down, we got to scrimp and save. Or they're spending maybe too much and withdrawing too much on their account, so they just don't know a confident way to go through their retirement years. That's a lot of stress. That's a lot of worry. And the cool thing is that's all solved with proper planning and going through the planning process that you lead clients through each and every day.
It absolutely is. And so I do encourage everybody to get a plan, whether that's with me. I only take a few clients a month, so I can't take everybody that's possibly listening to this podcast, but I am not the only good advisor out there either. You need to have an advisor that has your best interest at heart, that wants to make sure that you have a good plan that's going to carry you through all the way to the end of retirement, and is going to help you see the things that maybe you don't see, make sure that you've got everything lined up where it needs to be, and that will give you the confidence that you're looking for to be able to retire and enjoy retirement without worry.
Yep. Just like to bring it home with the weather analogy, just like the weather is always changing, so are the markets. But our goal is not to predict every storm. It's to make sure that whatever the conditions are, we can handle it. And that's what proper planning really looks like. That's the feeling you should be after, at least. If you'd like to explore if you're a good fit to work with Liz and talk a little bit more about your individual situation, you can certainly do that. Very easy to reach out. Best way to do that is to go to retireonyourbestpath.com. Name of the show, retireonyourbestpath.com. Lots of information there for you. We've got contact info listed in the description of today's show as well, so it's very easy to reach out, touch base, and have a conversation about what you're going through, what your goals and needs are into the future. Again, retireonyourbestpath.com. Liz, thank you so much for taking the time to chat today, as always, and we'll look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Thank you, Walter. I enjoyed it. Good conversation.
Yep. Take care, and we'll see everybody next time right back here on Retire on Your Best Path.
The preceding program is sponsored by Best Path Advisors, which is solely responsible for its content. Securities offered through J.W. Cole Financial, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advice offered through J.W. Cole Advisors. Best Path Advisors, J.W. Cole Financial, and J.W. Cole Advisors are unaffiliated entities. The opinions expressed by Liz Whitberry should not be construed as specific tax, legal, or investment advice, nor as an offer to buy or sell any securities mentioned herein. Neither J.W. Cole Financial nor its representatives provide legal, tax, or accounting advice. Persons who provide such advice do so in a capacity other than as a registered representative of J.W. Cole. Investing is subject to risks, including the loss of principal. Due to volatility within the markets mentioned, opinions are subject to change without notice. Information is based on sources believed to be reliable, however, their accuracy or completeness cannot be guaranteed.